The whole room had already looked away from me before the bidding even began, which I had counted on, because being looked away from is the closest thing to mercy an auction block offers. I stood on the stage in the lamplight of Haldane's hall, with my scarred arm bared the way the auctioneer had bared it, because a buyer should see what he is getting, he said. And what they were getting was a debt-bonded Omega with a brand scar running from wrist to elbow and a face the firelight did no favours. The auctioneer named my bond price. Nobody answered. He named half of it. A man near the front laughed. He named a third, the price of a good dog, and the silence that came back was the particular silence of a room agreeing, all at once and without a word, that I was worth less than the breath it would take to bid. I had decided long ago that I would not weep where anyone could profit from it. So I looked out over the heads of 200 people who had already forgotten I was a person, and I waited for the auctioneer to give up and have me dragged off to whatever came next. Then one voice cut through everything from the very back of the hall. "Everything I have." The auctioneer's hand, which had been raised to wave me away, started to shake. I could not see the man who had said it. He stood at the very back where the lamplight gave out, a tall shape in a plain travelling hood, and he had not raised his voice, and somehow it had carried into every corner of that hall like cold water poured down a collar. 3 words. The crowd turned as one body to look at him, and then the crowd did something I had never seen a crowd do at one of Haldane's auctions. It went quiet with fear. "That is not a recognised bid," the auctioneer managed. "Sir, you must name a sum." I named it. The hood turned very slightly, and the lamplight caught the lower edge of a hard jaw. "Everything I have, set against your reserve, your house, and Lord Haldane's standing in the north, should anyone care to weigh them." A pause that the whole hall fell into. "Shall I have it written down?" I was 24 years old, and I had been bonded against a debt that was never mine since I was 18, and I had seen enough of the world's cruelty to mistrust its sudden kindnesses most of all. I stood on that stage and watched a hooded stranger empty a room of its courage with 3 words, and I did not feel saved. I felt sold to something I could not see the shape of, which is a different and older fear. The crowd parted for him as he came forward. It parted the way water parts for something underneath it, and by the time he reached the foot of the stage and the auctioneer had gone the colour of tallow, and Lord Haldane himself had come out from behind the curtain with his smile already curdling, I understood that whoever this man was, he was not a buyer. He was a reckoning, and I was somehow standing in the middle of it. Let me go back, because the why of all this is the whole story, and I had less of it than anyone in that hall. I was an Omega, the lowest rank a wolf is born to, the rank that exists to be protected and is instead most often used, and I had spent 6 years working off a debt my dead father had signed me into, in the kennels and still rooms of Lord Haldane's border holding. The scar I wore from wrist to elbow I had earned in my 2nd year there, and I did not talk about how, because the one time I had spoken of it, Haldane had made very sure I understood the cost of my own memory. I had learned to keep my head down and my mouth shut and my mind my own, which is the only freedom a bonded Omega is allowed, and I had made it enough. Mostly. I told myself it was enough. And then Haldane's debts came due all at once, the way a proud man's always do, and he began selling off his holding to cover them, and I went onto the block with the furniture, and a hooded man at the back of the hall said, "Everything I have," and nothing was ever enough again. He took me out of that hall himself, not a servant, him, with one hand at my shoulder to part the last of the crowd, and a single scarred man falling in at his other side, who I would later know as Cedric, and the cold night air hitting my face like the first honest thing I had felt in years. He put his own travelling cloak around me in the yard, over my bared arm, without a word, and the gesture undid me more than any cruelty could have, because cruelty I understood, and this I did not. "You will want to know what I expect of you," I said, when we were clear of the lamps, because I had learned that it was always better to know the price up front. "Whatever it is, I would rather hear it now." The hood turned toward me. "I expect nothing of you," he said. "Everyone expects something. You just spent everything you have." I did. And then, low, in a voice that had gone strange, "I have been trying to spend it on you for 6 years. I am only sorry it took me this long to find the right room." I did not know what to do with that. I had never in my life been a thing someone had been looking for. I had only ever been a thing people were trying to be rid of. If you have ever been valued at the price of a good dog by a room full of people who could not be bothered to see you, if you want to know what it costs a king to find the one person he owes everything to, and whether being someone's debt is the same as being seen, stay with me. Follow her. Do not lose the thread, because the man who bought my freedom was not who I thought he was. And neither, it turned out, was I. He brought me north, not to a cell and not to a servant's hall, but to a fortress of grey stone with banners I did not recognize, and a tower room with a fire and a door I was free to open, which frightened me more than a locked one would have. I kept waiting for the cost of it to arrive. I had been raised to know that nothing comes to an omega for nothing. It was Cedric who told me whose fortress I was standing in, 3 days later, when he found me trying to slip out a side gate because a kindness I could not explain felt more like a trap than chains ever had. "You do not know who he is," Cedric said. Not a question. He looked almost sorry. "Of course you do not. He would never say it. The man who bought you, girl, that is Ronan, the Alpha King of the Iron Territories." I sat down on the cold step of the side gate because my legs declined to keep holding me. The Alpha King, the most powerful wolf in the north, a name even Haldane's kennel girls knew, had put on a plain hood and walked into a border slaver's auction and bid everything he had on a scarred omega no one else would name a price for. And then had brought her home and asked nothing, and given her a door she could open, and apologized for taking 6 years to find her. "Why?" I said. It came out with no breath behind it. "Why me? He has never seen me before in his life." Cedric was quiet for a long moment. "That," he said, "is a thing he has to tell you himself. And he is a coward about exactly one thing in the whole world, and it is this. So you may have to make him." So I made him. I found him that night in the one room of that fortress that had no fire lit, a small, cold room off his own wing, and I did not wait to be received because I was finished waiting to be received by anyone. He was standing at a cold hearth with something small in his hand, turning it over and over, and when he saw me, his face did a thing I had not seen a powerful man's face do, which was become afraid. "Cedric told you," he said. "Cedric told me you are a king. Cedric did not tell me why a king knows my arm by the scar on it." Because I had seen it, in the auction yard and again now. The way his eyes went to the brand scar first, always first, not with the flinch everyone else gave it, but with something closer to grief. "You said you had been trying to spend everything on me for 6 years. I want the why, Ronan. I have been sold and bonded and looked away from my whole life, and I have never once been told the truth about my own self by anyone. You are going to be the first." He opened his hand. In it was a single link of iron, one link of a broken chain, worn smooth, the kind of thing a man carries for years until it has worn a groove in his palm. 6 years ago, he said, before I was crowned, before I was anything, I rode the border in secret to learn the truth of what Lord Haldane was doing to the packs under his hand. He learned who I was. He took me. He kept me 3 weeks in his kennels, chained, and on the last night he heated a branding iron, because a marked man is a humbled man, and he wanted to send the North's heir home with his face ruined as a message about what Haldane could reach. His thumb moved over the iron link, and a kennel girl with a key she had stolen, and no reason on earth to use it for a stranger, broke the chain off my wrist in the dark. And when the iron came, when Haldane swung it at my face, she put her own arm in its path. She took the brand meant for me, and she shoved me through a gap in the kennel wall and told me to run and not look back. And I was a coward, and I ran, and I did not look back, and I never learned her name. The cold room was very quiet. I could hear the fire in the next room, and not in this one. I have looked for her for 6 years, he said. I have sent men to every auction and every holding Haldane ever touched. I have carried this, the iron link, because she gave me everything she had, her one chance to stay invisible and survive. For a stranger she owed nothing. And I swore that if I ever found her, I would give her everything I have, and mean it as the plain arithmetic it is, because that is the debt. He finally looked up at me, and his eyes were wet, and a king's eyes have no business being wet. And then they walked you up onto Haldane's block and bared your arm, and I knew the scar before I knew your face, Marin. I would know that scar in the dark. I have seen it in the dark for 6 years. I want to tell you that I remembered him. I did not at first. He had been a starved, beaten captive in the dark, and I had broken 100 small rules in those years and could not have told you which broken boy this one had been. But I remembered the iron coming. I remembered the choice. I had made it without thinking, the way you pull your hand from a fire, and I had paid for it with the scar and 3 days in the dark when Haldane found the empty chain, and I had never once in 6 years let myself believe the boy had lived. Here is the thing the whole North got wrong about that auction, and the thing I had gotten wrong about my own life. I was not the scarred Omega a king rescued out of pity. I was the one who had done the rescuing first. The saviour story everyone told, the powerful man and the pitiful broken girl, had the arithmetic exactly backwards. He had not bought me. He had been trying for 6 years to pay me back. And the scar 200 people in that hall had looked away from in disgust was the mark I had taken, so that the man at the back of the room would have a face left to come and find me with. Something in me that had been bent low for 6 years stood up straight in that cold room and did not bend again. "Then I am not your debt," I said. My voice had gone quiet and flat, the register I keep for the things that matter most. A debt is a thing you pay off and are free of. You did not bid everything you have on a debt. So you are going to have to be honest with me about which one it is. The woman who broke your chain, or the woman standing in front of you? Because I will not spend the rest of my life being thanked. I have had enough of being a thing other people feel things about. Pity, disgust, gratitude. I want to be a person someone actually sees, even you. For a long moment, the Alpha King of the Iron Territories could not answer, which told me he had heard me. "I do not know how to want a person without owing them," he said at last, very low. "No one ever gave me anything that did not have a price until you, in the dark, with a key you stole. You ruined me for the whole transaction of the world. I have been a king for 6 years, and everyone who comes to me wants a thing, and I learned to give them things instead of myself. And then I went looking for you, because you were the one person alive I could not pay back. And now you are standing in my cold room, telling me that paying you back is the one thing you do not want. A breath. Teach me the other thing. I am asking. I have everything, and I do not know how to give a single piece of it as a gift instead of a debt. It was not a declaration. It was better than one, because it was true, and I had been lied to kindly enough times to know the difference. What we did instead, over the days that followed, was learn each other in the small and ordinary ways that a debt never allows. This is the part the songs leave out, and it is the part I would keep if I could only keep one. He did not know how to give a thing without it being payment, so his wolf did it for him, the way a wolf always says what the man cannot. I would come down to the still room I had asked for and find things left on the work table. A twist of good beeswax, a better knife than the one I owned, once a single late apple set down square in the middle of the bench like an offering at a shrine. Never a word attached. Always, when I looked, the king somewhere nearby, being unconvincingly busy with something else. Your wolf is leaving me things, I told him, in the library on the third such evening. I had taken to finding him there because he had taken to being there. I am aware. He did not look up from the book he was not reading. It does not consult me. It has decided you are under-provisioned and it will not be reasoned with. You could simply hand them to me. I could. His jaw moved. Handing a thing over feels like settling an account. Leaving it feels like... He stopped, hunting the word, and his hand found the edge of the table, the way I was learning it did when his wolf was loud. Like hoping you will take it, which you might not, which is the whole terror of it. He finally looked at me. Do you know I have not been uncertain of an outcome in 6 years? I command a kingdom, and I cannot work out how to give a healer an apple. I laughed before I could stop myself, the first real laugh I had laughed in longer than I could account for, and I watched it land on him like something physical, like warmth coming back into a hand. He offered me his hand then, across the table, not for anything, just offered it, open, palm up, the most dangerous thing a careful man can do. And I looked at it, and I did not take it, not because I did not want to, but because I had spent 6 years being touched only when I was being used, and I needed, just once, to be the one who decided when. He understood. He did not reach further. He let his hand rest there a moment, open and unanswered, and then drew it back without a flicker of grievance, and that, the offering taken back gently, the door left open rather than forced, did more to undo 6 years of my flinching than any grand gesture ever could have. We sat in the firelight a long time after that, not touching, the offered hand hanging in the air between us like a promise neither of us was ready to spend. But we did not get to finish learning each other, because Lord Haldane had not, it turned out, finished with either of us. He came north under a banner of grievance, which is the only kind of banner a man like Haldane has left when his money is gone. He came to the king's own court because he had worked out exactly what I now knew, and a man with Haldane's history cannot afford a living witness who has the king's ear. He came to take me back, and failing that, to make certain I never spoke. His first move was the law. He stood in the great hall of the Iron Territories and claimed that the king had stolen bonded property under a false name, that the auction sale was void, that I belonged to the wolf and thorn of his holding by a debt bond signed before witnesses, and that a king who took an omega off a rival's block by trickery had shamed the throne. He had brought the bond paper. He had brought sworn men. He nearly had it too, the court murmured, because the paper was real. My father's mark was on it, and a king who simply tore it up was a king who tore up the law. And Haldane knew the value of making Ronan choose between me and the rule he governed by. His second move he made the same night, when the law looked like it might not be enough, because Haldane never trusted one knife when he could carry two. He sent a man up the tower stair with orders to make the witness quiet before the court reconvened. It very nearly worked. I was awake. I am always awake. 6 years in Haldane's kennels teaches a woman to sleep like a hare. And I heard the latch, and I had a still-room knife under the pillow because old habits had kept me alive this long, and I did not wait to be saved. I put my back to the wall, and I did what I had to, and Cedric and the guard came at the noise to find me standing over a man Haldane would later swear he had never sent, with my hands shaking and my voice perfectly steady. He sent this one to silence me before I could testify, I told the king, when he came up the stair 3 steps at a time with murder in his face. Which tells the whole court there is something I could say that Lord Haldane would kill to keep unsaid. Let me say it. In the hall, in front of everyone, that is how this ends, not with you tearing up his paper and looking like a tyrant, but with me opening my mouth at last after 6 years of his hand over it. Ronan looked at me for a long moment, and then he did the thing that I think I loved him for before I loved anything else about him. He did not refuse to let me risk it. He stepped aside and let me fight my own war, because he had finally understood that I had never once needed rescuing. I had needed someone to stop standing in front of the door. I stood up in the great hall of the Iron Territories the next morning, a scarred omega in front of a court that had been told I was stolen property, and I told them what Lord Haldane had done. I told them about the kennels and the 3 weeks of chains. I told them about the branding iron meant for the face of their own king 6 years before he was crowned, and the kennel girl who had put her arm in its path. I bared the scar that 200 people had looked away from at the auction, and I held it up in the light of the king's own hall, and I said, "He did not lose his bonded property to a trick. He lost it to the truth, which he has been trying to brand out of the world for 6 years. Here is the brand. Ask him whose face it was meant for." Haldane reached for the blade then, because a man who cannot survive being seen always does, and it came at me, the witness, the loose end, but I had grown up pulling my hand from his fires, and I turned it, and the cost still landed. His edge opened my forearm along the old scar so that new blood ran down over the brand, and the ground tilted, but I stayed on my feet, because there are rooms a woman does not get to fall down in. I bled over the mark I had taken 6 years before in front of the whole court, and I did not waver, and the court saw their king's witness wounded by the very man who had tried to brand him, and that was the end of Lord Haldane in the north. Ronan's wolf had him before his blade hit the floor. They did not kill him. They gave him to the packs he had bled along the border, to be judged by the people who had the most names to give the dead. The bond paper burned in the great hall's own fire, and I watched my father's debt go up as ash, and I felt nothing leave me with it but weight. Ronan reached me as the room tilted. He did not lift me. He put his shoulder under mine so that I could stay standing, which is the difference between being rescued and being seen. And he had learnt that difference now, the hard way, and I have loved him for learning it every day since. They stitched my arm in the tower room with the fire and the open door. He sat with me through it, which kings do not do, and when it was done he did not thank me, which I had warned him not to, and he learned fast. "I had a speech," he said. "I have been writing it for 6 years, for when I found you. It was very good. It thanked you properly." He turned the iron link over in his fingers. "I am not going to give it. You were right. I would only be paying you back. So instead, I am going to ask you for something which I have never once done in my life, because asking means you might say no, and I would rather owe the whole world than hear you say no." His hand closed around the link. "Stay. Not as my debt, not as the girl who saved me. Stay as Maron, who told a court full of wolves the truth with her own blood running down her arm. I do not want to pay you back anymore. I want to start something I will never be able to settle, and spend the rest of my life happily in arrears." I made him wait until I had stopped pretending the wound was why my eyes were wet. Then I said yes. The kiss that came after I will not give you in detail, except that it tasted of nothing at all, the way the truest things do, and that it was the moment I stopped being a thing the world had looked away from and became, at last, a person someone had crossed 6 years and a crowded hall to see. A year on, I am the Luna of the Iron Territories, which still makes the court swallow strangely, and I keep the stillroom myself because I will not be a relic for anyone, and because a woman who learned medicine in a slaver's kennels has things to teach a king's healers that they do not get in books. The scar I wore from wrist to elbow is 2 scars now, the old brand and the new line over it, and I do not hide either of them, because between them they are the truest record I own of who I am and what I chose. Ronan still carries the iron link. He keeps trying to give it to me. I keep giving it back. It has become the thing we say I love you with, that worn piece of broken chain, passed back and forth, neither of us willing to let it settle into a debt. And every so often, in open court, when some lord grows proud about rank and blood and who is worth what, the Alpha King of the Iron Territories will look across the hall at the scarred Omega no one would bid on, and his wolf will come up gold into his eyes, helpless with it, in front of everyone, and he will say, quietly, the way he said it the first time, so that it carries into every corner, "Everything I have." And the whole court has learned by now exactly what he means, and exactly what it cost, and exactly who paid first. So tell me, before you go, because Ronan and I have never quite agreed, when he bid everything he had on a woman no one else would name a price for, was that a debt being paid in the end? Or was it already love wearing a debt's clothes, because love was the thing he had never been taught to give? I have my answer. He has his, and he is usually wrong about himself in the most honest way a man can be. Tell me yours below, and if you want to follow what comes next, the first time I take my seat at the Border Council, across from the Pax Haldane bled, and what Ronan's wolf does the day the men who looked away at the auction have to bow to the Omega they would not bid on, comment "the link" and stay close to the fire. Where are you listening from tonight? There is a chair at our table now, and a door that is always open, and a piece of broken chain on the mantel that means more than the crown. Come and sit. That is the whole of it. Her side of the story.